And so this morning's talk is lies of evolutionists. Because you can't have somebody believe in a lie by telling them the truth. So how come you believe in this nothing exploded and turned into everything lie? It's because you're being taught lies. And the Bible tells us in Colossians 2:8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. So philosophy, that's lover of knowledge. Vain deceit is empty lies. And that's what you find in college and basically our education system. So we have to beware of that, or if we believe a lie, we could get really hurt. And also, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. This is 2 Timothy 4:4. Turned unto fables. Yeah, I would say that. They're turning into fables. Once upon a time, nothing exploded and it turned into people. That's a big fat fable. But how do they get people to believe it? And this is evolutionism in a nutshell, the belief that hydrogen and helium eventually turn into people. And when they attack my foundation, it's like, do you really believe hydrogen and helium turn into people? Man, I don't have enough faith for that. And they'll say, well, evolution starts with the first living cell. You know, they say evolution, it's not part of the Big Bang. Well, not according to Neil deGrasse Tyson. This was a book at a Christian college, if you can believe it, in their bookstore. That's the problem we have. But it's 14 billion years of cosmic evolution. So if he's calling it evolution, so am I. In fact, evolution became, in a sense, a scientific religion. Almost all scientists have accepted it, and many are prepared to bend their observations to fit in with it. They wouldn't do that, would they? They wouldn't lie to us, would they? They wouldn't change the evidence to fit the theory instead of change the theory to fit the evidence. Well, this is Haeckel's drawings. He loved Darwinian theory because it got rid of God, and that was the point. And he said if only there was evidence, and he waited 10 years and there wasn't any evidence. So then he did this. He said that basically when we are being developed, we're developing, we go through our evolutionary phases. You know, the fish to, how does that go? The fish to amphibian to reptile to mammal. And he called it some fancy words, ontogeny, recapitulates, phylogeny. That was the main thing. They wanted to sound smart. And so we had all these drawings saying, look at that. The human's way to the right, and look at it. It looks just like the rabbit, the chicken, the turtle, the salamander. It looks just like it. And that was in the textbooks for 100 years. And it was a fraud. When you look at the photographs, they're nothing like each other. And this person says it's the worst case of scientific fraud, deliberately misleading. These are fakes. And listen to the PhD talk about it.
If you go back earlier in development, the different classes of vertebrates look even more different.
According to Wells, Haeckel, and many modern textbooks, mislead students not just because of faked drawings, but because they leave out the earliest stages of embryonic development. What students are shown as the first stage of embryonic development is actually the mid-stage.
And very few textbooks show those earliest stages, and yet that's the whole point. It's the earliest stages that are supposed to be the most similar, and they're not. Some textbooks actually use photographs of embryos, but they pick only that stage and those classes that happen to look most similar. And they omit the earlier stages, and they omit those classes that don't look similar. So that, to me, is picking the evidence very carefully to support the theory, and that's not good science.
Not good science, and we're going to show you some stuff that's really not good science. We've experienced a lot of not good science these last few years. And I was at the St. Cloud State, and I asked an evolutionist, you know, what's your best evidence for evolution? And ask them that. And they'll stop for about 10 seconds, their eyes will go to the ceiling, and he said human evolution, and we'll get to that. And then he said whale evolution. And that's what a lot of people think. This is the best evidence for evolution, is the transitional whales. And there's Rhodocetus in this 10th grade biology class going from a land animal to a whale. And let's just see what they have to say about Rhodocetus.
When this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodocetus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodocetus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of the tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodocetus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodocetus, since that part of the fossil was missing.
What was the reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodocetus based on the other pieces of anatomy?
Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebra indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodocetus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodocetus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on a whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail in really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluke tail.
Many experts consider whales to be the best fossil evidence for evolution, but are unaware of these discrepancies. Opponents of evolution contend that whale evolution is nothing more than hopeful supposition. If museum diagrams are redrawn and corrected for various discrepancies, opponents argue that whale evolution is non-existent.
Non-existent. And yet, does that make the big science journals? You know, they publicize the transitional whale like crazy, and if you don't see that, you're still going to believe it. And that's just like the dinosaur blood. I mean, you guys know more than a lot of PhD scientists. Because Bob Enyart went on a cruise with a lot of those PhD scientists, and he would ask them about the dinosaur blood and dinosaur bone, and they said, that's not true. So he'd pull it up on his phone, and their jaws would drop to the ground. It's like, oh. And so they just keep sweeping it under the rug. My job and everybody's job is to start saying, hey, what's under the rug? Let's pull the rug out and take a peek. And this is Piltdown Man, the greatest hoax in the history of science. This is Natural History Museum. So Piltdown Man, the skull was human and the jaw was an ape. They discovered it in 1908 and 1912, and it's in the textbook until the 50s, so 40 years of this lie telling people that they have ape-like ancestors. And they couldn't touch the fossils. And when they finally got to the fossils, it was just clearly an obvious fraud. So they're lying to us. And also Nebraska Man. The evidence of the Nebraska Man was used by evolutionists in the famous Scopes evolution trial in Dayton, Tennessee in 1925. William Jennings Bryant, he was stunned. The experts stunned him with the facts of Nebraska Man. The experts scoffed and made a mockery of him. After all, who was he to question the world's greatest scientific authorities? And what evidence did they have for a Nebraska Man? It was a tooth. One tooth. And this is what they drew in London. From that tooth, they drew him and his family and his tools. And they didn't have any evidence for that at all. And it's actually from a pig, an extinct pig. And so they lost a lot of credibility like they've lost these last few years. If they can be so wrong about a pig's tooth, what else are you wrong about? And this is one that really bothers me. This is, they're just blatantly lying. This is Lucy, and it says they have a remarkably complete skeleton. Remarkably complete. That's what it says in the box. Now we got 200 some bones. What would remarkably complete? And in this textbook right here, it says that's a nearly complete skeleton. Nearly and remarkably complete. So that they're telling you, man, you must have, from my opinion, that'd be like 180 bones, nearly complete. No, they got 40 some. So it's a blatant lie in the textbook. It's not nearly complete. And notice the hands and notice the feet. They don't have any bones, but in the St. Louis Museum, they put human hands and human feet on it and eye whites. And so how do they get that thing to walk upright? This is In Search of Human Origins. It's a NOVA broadcast. This is their video. I'm shocked they put it out. And I was at a kiosk talking to an anthropology major. And I told them what they did to and she wouldn't even look at it. But if I told you what they did, you wouldn't believe me. So I'm going to show you from their video. Keep in mind that the hip is a chimp. It looks like a chimp. They keep saying it looks like a chimp, and they can't have that. It's got to walk upright.
Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human.
So the hip looks like a chimpanzee. Well, I'm saying it is a chimpanzee.
But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later fossilization.
You don't fuse together after you're dead. Your bones only fuse together when you're alive. When you're dead, I don't care what process you put it in, it's not coming back together.
After Lucy died, some of her bones lying in the mud must have been crushed or broken, perhaps by animals browsing at the lakeshore.
This has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
Well, if she's a chimp, it's not impossible. It's just impossible for a human. You know, it's not anatomically impossible if it's a chimp.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost.
Oh, it's not lost. If I told you what you did, if they did, you wouldn't believe me. Check out what they do. This is their video.
Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Well, I hope so. If you take it apart and put it back together, it better look like you want. And I was at a kiosk, like I said, next to the anthropology major there, and I said, they cut Lucy's hip and twisted it to make it walk upright. She said, no, they didn't. I said, sure they did. She said, no, they didn't. And I said, I got it on my computer. Do you want to see it? No, I don't want to see it. Don't confuse me with the facts. I got my faith firmly set. I don't want to challenge it. And 100-some years ago, this is Dr. Thomas Chamberlain. He was a bigwig in the geology department at the University of Chicago and president of the University of Wisconsin. And this is what they were saying back at the turn of the century. He warned researchers not to let one hypothesis dominate their thinking. Instead, they should always have or seek multiple working hypotheses. That way people can sharpen their analytical skills. They can compare and contrast. They can think critically. Because if you don't have it, you simply memorize and conform. And I quoted that to a professor at St. Cloud State, and she goes, that's not how we do science. And she's right. Listen to Jesse Waters. Now this has to do with, well, I'll just a little comment afterwards. Watch out for consensus. That's the main thing, consensus. If it's consensus, it's not science. Science is, and if it's science, it's not consensus. But listen to what they're pushing.
This is world-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, a scientist explaining why you and everybody out there shouldn't ask questions. Watch.
There's a list of top-ranking medical professionals. Just take a look at them here.
Excuse me,
Dr. Peter McCullough. No, I want to go through what happened
consensus.
Here. This is the problem with the consensus.
The consensus.
Okay,
medical professional.
I want you to
because the medical is so huge. I can find you an astrophysicist who is sure we've been visited by aliens.
The problem was
that's not the
problem was the scientific method died here, and this is the point I want to make. It died a death here, and I need you to help me save it because Dr. Peter McCullough is the leading cardiologist.
I don't care if titles don't matter here.
But what should matter?
They don't matter.
What
matters
should matter?
Is the consensus.
What should?
I'm not interested in medical pedigree. I'm interested in medical consensus, in scientific consensus.
Scientists that were on the ground, that were dealing with patients, were being censored, were being shut down. Their YouTube channels were being shut down. Their LinkedIn's were being shut down.
Because the individual scientist does not matter.
So let me get this straight. The scientist doesn't want you to follow the scientific method because it goes against the scientific consensus, even if the consensus was wrong.
And so there we are. The consensus. It's the Inez-Siegelwes effect. You know, this is the consensus. It used to be the consensus that you didn't wash your hands after you did an autopsy before you went and delivered a baby. You didn't wash your hands between surgeries. And this Inez-Siegelwes, he proved it wrong. He said, no, you got to wash your hands. And they mocked him. And it's just the consensus, and science progresses sometimes one funeral at a time. And now we think they're just crazy for thinking that you don't have to wash your hands. And so the consensus, watch out for the consensus. The greatest scientists in history broke away from consensus.